Jedd Fisch needs to find a way to build on Washington's recruiting success in 2027.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla-y cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers on this Friday. We're going to spend a whole bunch of time talking recruiting. At the end, we're going to talk about some top 10, top 8, all those sorts of lists that the Huskies made for a couple of the top players in California. We'll get there later on because June 5th is shaping up as a massive recruiting weekend for Washington's front seven and defensive line. We'll get there in a little bit because before we dive into some of the specifics, I want to take a step back here and take an overall look at what Washington is doing on the recruiting trail. Because as I look at it, and as you everydayers know, I've talked about this for a while, Washington did a tremendous job on the recruiting trail in the 2026 class. There were a couple of areas that were certainly lacking a little bit, but all in all, finishing with a top 15 recruiting class is something that you need to tip your cap to this coaching staff. And now that we look at it, in terms of what you need to do to continue leveling up on the recruiting trail, is you need to go out there and at the very least match that again this season. That is the expectation, and that is what the expectation should always be, because this is what Jedd Fisch set for himself when he got here. And it's something where I know a lot of everydayers are unhappy with the way the transfer portal went. It's because, and we've heard this before and we're going to hear it again, this is where Jedd Fisch wants to build his team, through the high school recruiting ranks. So as we look at this junior day list where there are going to be a whole bunch of big time prospects on campus, we need to see this coaching staff go out there and land several of these top 150, top 200 players, depending on which rankings you like to use. And there are 3 guys that I want to highlight. And if you don't land at least one of these guys, I think that that is unacceptable at this point in time with how Washington has just, again, continued to build themselves up and continue to try to push on the recruiting trail to land these top targets. And the first one I want to talk about is 5-star offensive tackle Oluwasemilore Olubabola from New Jersey, because this is a kid who you everydayers know. We've talked about him before. The fact that Washington has gotten in the mix like this for his services is an incredible job. And it's certainly a testament to Jedd Fisch and Michael Switzer and to this coaching staff for going out there to New Jersey and getting that kid on campus. That is not an easy thing to do. However, that's not good enough. Just quite frankly, it's not. Because as you look at where this coaching staff wants to take this team and what it's going to take to get there to compete every single year with a lot of these other top programs in the Big Ten, whether you want to look at what Indiana's doing now after building on that national championship run, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, how they're doing on the recruiting trail so far. Every single thing that you are doing, you need to do to continue to level up. And again, you did that in a big way in 2026. And the fact that you are going out there and taking these big swings on these big time players from the East Coast is great. You need to do that, but it is not good enough. Another player who I certainly view in that same light is 4-star edge rusher Zane Rowe, because this is someone who you everydayers know. We talked about him the other day as well. Where he sits in terms of on Washington's board is very important with this, but on top of that, what Zane Rowe represents is critical to what this coaching staff needs to continue to do, because we're going to talk more about defensive line a little bit later on. So I'm not going to dive too much into that edge rusher. Obviously, we all know what kind of value a high-end defensive line brings to the football field, but this is a guy where even 2 years ago, I never would have expected Washington to even get to this point with Zane Rowe, which is why we haven't talked about him on this show a whole bunch leading up to this week, because I didn't feel that Washington had a solid enough foot in this race. And now it's not only that, but there are multiple reports now coming out saying that Washington is putting themselves in a position where they might be one of the leaders. So I look at that and I look at how he fits in this defense. And after getting Jordan Clay out of Texas last year, that certainly reset how I feel about what the Huskies are doing in that particular state on the recruiting trail. So I'd really like to see that. And the third guy here is I've kind of put two together in some of these high-end quarterbacks. One is four-star Peter Bouque from Massachusetts, where the Huskies have certainly been in the mix for his recruitment since he decommitted from Michigan a week or two ago. And look at some of these other high-end suitors, right? Georgia, Penn State, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Florida's in there as well. Washington certainly has a ways to go just looking at when they offered compared to some of these other schools. However, the Huskies have certainly done a very good job of putting themselves in the mix there, just like they've done with another guy who is going to be on campus for junior day, and that's four-star quarterback Blake Roskopf from down in Arizona. This is a guy who I'm very impressed with. You everydayers know I talked about him a couple of weeks ago, and just the athleticism that he provides outside of the pocket, the arm strength, the just projectability in terms of the high-end talent with the size and everything like that. That's all great, but you need to go out and find a way to close on one of, if not at least two, of those kinds of players, because as they continue to rise up recruiting boards, those are the kinds of players that will continue to push you into that national conversation, which is where it's very obvious this program can be. And if you continue to get these players, will continue to be on a national level. And that is what it's all about now, being in the Big Ten, where you need to go out into Texas and into New Jersey and just continue moving east to bring some of those players. You're never going to build a complete base from the Southeast or Texas or out in the Northeast. That's never going to be what Washington's game is, and that's okay. But if you can become a consistent threat for players like that on a year in, year out basis, that is exactly what you need to succeed in this conference, because that's where Michigan is. That's where Ohio State is. That's where all of these other big time programs in this conference can recruit. And for a long time, that just wasn't Washington's game. Chris Peterson didn't care too much about that. Jimmy Lake just kind of kicked his feet up, didn't care about recruiting at all. Kalen DeBoer's staff sort of did the same thing. And it is a very refreshing change of pace to listen to Jedd Fisch and anybody on this coaching staff talk about talent acquisition and how important that is to continuing to level up. And as you continue to stack these classes, if you are able to build on that in the 2027 class, these are the kinds of battles that you can go out and you can win more consistently. And again, you've done a very good job of putting yourselves in position for some of these top prospects. If you want to talk about a couple other ones, like four-star cornerback Evan Mack, four-star wide receiver Trey Moore, five-star defensive lineman Cassie Curry. Those are the kinds of players that every single year you need to go out and consistently be in the mix for, because with this coaching staff and with the way they are able to identify some under-the-radar talent, some of the guys we've talked about on the show, of course, like offensive lineman Ty Kennedy, who got a massive bump in the ratings on Thursday, running back Jeremy Adeyanju. I could go on and on and on about some of these underrated guys that have certainly gotten massive ratings bumps as Washington has continued to identify them. But I look at this coaching staff and I look at what they want to continue to do, and it's acquire this high-end talent and develop at a high rate and continue selling this whole NFL thing, which is great, but you need to put your money where your mouth is on a year in, year out basis. And again, if you are going to take the transfer portal approach of trying to find these guys that you like where the ceiling is and you like being able to develop them for a year, 2 years, that's fine. But you need to go out and make up for that in terms of the talent deficit and continue to improve that blue chip ratio by doing so through the high school ranks. And I think that that's what the plan is. And Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff need to be held to that top 15 expectation now every single year, because that's where the bar was set by him and his staff last year, because they did an impressive job. And now it's not about resting on your laurels and saying, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Let's identify this guy and that guy. No, you need to go out and do that once again in the 2027 class. And more specifically, they need to do that on the defensive line. And June 5th is going to be a massive, massive weekend for all that to come to fruition. And we'll get there right after the 5-hour energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick for the 5-hour energy flavor draft, and it's strawberry banana. It is just a go-to flavor for me. A tropical delight with strawberry, a taste that goes in everything from smoothies and milkshakes to cake and ice cream. It's a smooth, creamy fruit profile, and it really is reminiscent of a fruit smoothie. Another one for me that always just gives me a nice little boost is a peach mango, right? Peach flavor on that first sip. And then that mango adds tropical depth and sweetness. I absolutely love fruity things like that. They really give me just a boost of energy in the morning when I need it. 5-Hour Energy Shots give you a boost with zero sugar. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-Hour Energy Shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Game Time. The biggest stretch of the college basketball season is almost here. Buzzer beaters, bracket busters, and those unforgettable moments that everyone's talking about the next day. Being there live for something like that, that's bucket list stuff. The hard part is always just actually getting tickets, long queues, prices jumping around, and surprise fees at checkout. The Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. It's incredibly simple to use. The Game Time guarantee means 100% legitimate tickets delivered on time at the best price. And here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see, so what you see is what you pay. Period. Zone deals let you pick the section and save even more while Game Time picks the seats. And I love being able to follow teams in the app and get alerts when new deals drop. No stress, no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. That's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. Take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So as we look at just what some of these recruiting weekends are going to look like, June 5th is going to be absolutely critical for one person, and that's defensive line coach Jason Kaufusi, because Washington has done a very good job of getting a lot of their top defensive line targets to come on a visit together, where right now you got 3 of those guys. That's 4-star defensive tackle John Ioane, 3-star defensive lineman Montana Toilolo, and a new addition to that weekend is 4-star defensive tackle Tevita Nonu from O'Day High School here in Seattle, who is just a tremendous pass rusher and exactly what you need along the interior. So we look at all that, and then one other name that I should throw in there is Washington's most recent commit, 3-star defensive lineman Matamatagi Uyunglele, who's currently scheduled to visit on May 29th, told our buddy Scott Eklund over at dogman.com that he might push that visit to June 5th so he can visit alongside his teammate Montana Toilolo, which I think is a great idea. And one thing to note about all of this is as this visit weekend continues to come together, I wouldn't be surprised if we see 1 or 2 more guys, whether it be the coach twins and Ethan and Justin, who are also committed, 3-star linebacker Titus Osterman, some of these other guys in the front 7 to come join this weekend, because getting as many of those players together as possible is critical, because we've talked about this a lot, right? As many options as possible along the defensive line, just continue adding that depth and continue adding that talent year after year after year is exactly what you need at that position. And it's very clear that Washington understands that, but the execution of that over the last couple of years has been difficult, and it hasn't been the best, to say the least, where you look at that 2026 class and the Huskies did a great job reeling in a couple of talented guys really early on in the cycle, whether it be Derek Coleman-Brusa and T.I. Mukais. And then you look at how the rest of it came together. Getting Tom Malu as a back end of the roster developmental type of piece was a great move. It's really nice to be able to do that. But you had to go out there and you had to find J.D. Hill in November. And I'm not knocking the coaching staff for doing that at all, because you did. And then, of course, you look at how productive he was and what kind of bump he got in the ratings before signing day. That's great. That's exactly what you need. That's exactly what you're looking for. But that's also just a bit of a situation of him falling into your lap. And again, it's not bad that happened, but you want to be able to wrap those guys up as early as possible. And I especially look at this class at defensive tackle in particular, and why it's so nice to see that Tevita Nonu is going to be joining this weekend in particular, because again, the more you can have these guys around each other and start to build that bond early and try to just have them continue to recruit each other, all that sort of stuff, that does matter. And that does mean something. And 3-star linebacker Isaiah Lilula is another guy who's going to be on this visit weekend as well, 3-star linebacker from Southern California. And again, the more that you can continue to get these guys around each other and build and build and build, it just does nothing but help this coaching staff. And I think that if there's one position you really need to see that right now, again, it is along the defensive line, because whether it be along the interior, at edge, that is the position where it is going to make or break this class. And seeing as many of those guys come in together as possible is a nice win. But like I was just saying a few minutes ago, that's not enough. It's not, because we saw what Ryan Walters can do with an average pass rush this past season. If you can go out there and I just acquire more of this top talent and get them into the mix early on in their careers, that's great. That's what you need. That's what you're looking for. Because to go back to Tevita Nonu in particular, I was getting a little ahead of myself there, where I really want to talk about what he brings to the table specifically, because one thing that you really need, and I've emphasized this a lot, you everydayers know this, is you need somebody who can go out there and shoot gaps and get after the quarterback and command a whole lot of attention. And that is exactly what Tevita Nonu can do for you, where he's listed at 6'4" and 270 pounds right now. You go out there and you look at just the film that he's brought to the table in terms of not just playing along the interior of the defensive line, but playing on the edge as well. He is someone who can absolutely be a game changer for you in that department. And the more that I look at this class, the more that it's one of those dudes that you just cannot let get away, because you look at the other offers that he's got on the table right now. There are certainly some big time programs in there. Penn State, Notre Dame. I know Oregon is offered recently and starting to make a push for him. But right now, you have an opportunity to secure him, because the 3 official visits that he's got set are Washington, Arizona, and UCLA. And those are schools that Jedd Fisch, Jason Kaufusi, Ryan Walters, Aaron Van Horn, whoever it is that you want to call out, those are the battles that Washington needs to win 10 times out of 10 for I would say pretty much every single prospect that they're going up against those schools for, but especially for an interior defensive lineman from here in Seattle, who this coaching staff has done a very good job of developing a relationship with. He was never going to be someone who's going to be, an easy shoe-in from your backyard, got all sorts of connections to UW sort of recruit, because of the position that he plays. And I think we've seen that come to fruition so far, because it has been a little bit tougher to just secure that commitment early, where we saw it from Derek Coleman-Brusa in May of last year, where that was a situation where there were some moments there where it's, okay, is he going to go to Ohio State? Is he going to go to Oregon? I don't know if that's the case as it just is right now as it pertains to Tevita Nonu, but you don't want to even put yourself in a situation where that could be the case. And again, you look at not just how Washington has built that connection with him, but you also just have another way to just continue making those inroads with Taylor Mays, who was a big-time recruit out of O'Day High School back in the day. And obviously he went down to USC, had all sorts of success there. And now being back home, I think that is a relationship that certainly has paid dividends already. And I think that the longer Taylor Mays is around, the stronger the O'Day High School to Washington pipeline is going to become, because it is so easy for him to go back over there and just continue selling and building that bridge, which is great. That's exactly what you want. And this is the kind of player that, for that reason, you cannot let get away. Where we saw what the whole fiasco with David Schwartzel was last year. We saw Fasiale wind up at Michigan State, but this is different. Because with David, it was always, okay, yeah, this is a big time dude. He's got all the ratings. He's got what you're looking for, but he wants to play edge. Washington wants him at defensive tackle. Obviously, eventually they were able to come to an agreement there on signing day and got that deal done. This is different, where Tevita Nonu is already projected to play on the interior. He already understands what kind of value he has, and the ratings continue to reflect that every time there's a new update. And being in Washington's backyard, it's great. I mean, all you everydayers know this. I've talked about this a lot. There is so much talent on the West Coast this year, on the interior of the defensive line, which is so rare nowadays. But it doesn't matter, because this kid is in a whole different class. He's in a league of his own because he's in your backyard. And if you're Jason Kaufusi, if you're Aaron Van Horn, Ryan Walters, anything less than a signature from this kid on signing day is an absolute failure. That's just the long and the short of it, because the more that you can get these local guys to stay home, which Washington has done a great job of, the better. But doing that at these positions of need, and the defensive line is very clearly the number one position of need for this roster right now, and will continue to be for the entirety of Washington's time in the Big Ten, just kind of cranks that up to 11, in my opinion. And you need to keep seeing that on a year in, year out basis. And you cannot let this kid get away, no matter where it might be. If it's Oregon or Utah or Penn State or Notre Dame, whatever, it doesn't matter where it is. This is a guy that Washington needs to land every single time. No excuses, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We're going to continue talking all about that, but let's head down to California, where Washington made some top lists for a few of their high priority targets. Right after a message from our friends over at Coast. Coast Pay is giving Locked On College listeners up to $2,000 credit for your business when you get started today. If you manage a crew, construction, HVAC, landscaping, any operation with trucks on a road, you already know how messy gas and material spending can get. Cards get shared, receipts disappear, and month-end turns into a headache. Coast Pay fixes all of that. Coast Pay is the modern fuel card and expense management tool built specifically for fleets, fuel, maintenance, materials, all on one card with real control and instant visibility. Every transaction shows up the moment it happens. No surprises. If someone fuels up at an odd time or tries to buy something outside their limit, you'll know instantly. Real-time alerts so you always know who's spending what and where is an awesome feature to have, along with fraud protection with employee check-ins by text, no shared pins. It's built for operators who don't have time to chase paperwork, and unlike old fuel cards, there are no contracts or commitments, just smarter expense control. Right now, Coast Pay is offering our listeners up to $2,000 credit when you get started at coastpay.com/lockedoncollege. Go to coastpay.com/lockedoncollege to see how you can earn up to $2,000 credit. Terms apply. The Coast Visa commercial credit card is issued by Celtic Bank. All card accounts are subject to credit approval. As we wrap up here today, it's time to talk California, because whenever we look at the recruiting trail, Washington has always had a strong foothold in California, and a lot of Husky greats have come out of the Golden State. So I feel like it's only fair to talk about some of these top prospects who did narrow their list down. I always hate using the word top so many times, where Danny Lang, the 4-star cornerback from Mater Dei, releases top 10. And Lincoln Mageo, the 4-star offensive lineman, releases top 7. Let's start with Danny Lang, because this one's probably going to be a little bit quicker. Washington was in there among some nation's other elite programs. And I know that Washington has had Danny Lang close to the top of their board for a very, very long time. I just don't feel great about that recruitment right now. The more I look at it, the Huskies could certainly find a way to work their way back in there. But as I look at it right now, he's set 3 official visits: Auburn, USC, Oregon. And it feels like those programs certainly just have a much bigger leg up right now. And we've seen Washington throw out some more offers in the secondary, got some official visits coming down the pipeline as well. I'm very curious to see what happens next there, because that's just not somebody who I have on my radar right now as someone that Washington is just firmly in the mix for. Again, things could change. Who knows? But that's where I am right now on him. Lincoln Mageo, on the other hand, that's a very different story. He releases top 7, and he's ranked as the number 1 offensive lineman in California by the 247 Sports Composite. And when you look at this top 7, Arizona, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, you got Utah in there, and UCLA. That's certainly a very solid group, and I feel like Washington has been well within the mix for him for a long time. And he's someone who is going to be on campus for junior day in early March. And the more that I look at this recruitment, I don't want to say the better that I feel, but I think that this is a guy where Washington is just, they have such a strong in and have developed such a strong relationship with him. Michael Switzer has certainly done a tremendous job of that. I think that he is someone who we're going to see take an official visit to Washington. And if UW winds up with him at the end of the day, I'm not going to be shocked. And this is one of those guys where the more that I look at this offensive line class, there is a very clear role for him, because this could be 4 guys. It could be 5 guys. I'm not too sure on numbers along the offensive line at this point in time, but that's one position that I can't say I'm overly concerned by, where I've talked about it a lot. Washington has done a tremendous job evaluating talent along the offensive line, and whoever they've brought in, where you look at the 2025 class, we've seen a lot of success. 3 of those guys saw time at various points last season. Obviously, one of them stands out a little bit more in freshman All-American John Mills, but Champ Talialia looked really solid whenever he was on the field. We saw Jack Schaefer get out there for a little bit, but I look at that. I look at the 2026 class, obviously Cody Green being the headliner there, and I feel very comfortable with what Washington is doing along the offensive line, because when you look at the position, you've got Jacoba Doyle, 4-star from here in Washington, who's already set up his official visit. Lincoln Mageo is another guy who would certainly be a great candidate for the interior. I'm going to say his name really quick, but not include him too much, because he's in a separate category in 3-star Reese Russell, because as a true center, this is just a little bit of a different discussion there. But I look at those 2 guys along the interior. DeJohn Yarborough is certainly a name I'm very intrigued by with where Washington stands with him as well. And then on top of that, Ty Kennedy is a true tackle kind of guy. We talked about him earlier in Oluwasemilore Olubabola and where Washington might be standing with him after being able to get him on campus. But this is a position where the Huskies have done very, very well for themselves over the last couple of years. And I want to see that continue in 2027. And Lincoln Mageo would certainly be a great way to continue to establish that pipeline, because I look at him right now at 6'3", 6'4", 280 pounds. I don't think that he's one of those guys that Washington would want to plug and play along the offensive line. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You can only do that so much at the position, but he's just one of those guys where as you continue to build up that depth and that talent that we're talking about on the defensive line, because you've seen it along the offensive line already, and now you need to see more of it. You need to see that continue in class after class after class, because we saw so much turnover when Jedd Fisch first arrived. And obviously that's, unavoidable to a certain extent with just how that transition was and how everything happened. But you want to put yourself in a situation where, unless you see something crazy like that happen, that you're always in a position where you can trust that unit as much as anything, especially in this conference when there's just so much strength and physicality, and so much of it is built around running the ball, playing good defense, all that sort of stuff. If Washington can just always have an answer for that, no matter who's playing quarterback, that's something that I'll feel comfortable with. And I feel like this is something that Washington understands very, very well and has just done such a good job of recruiting that position since Jedd Fisch's arrival that I don't think there's any reason to not trust Michael Switzer to go out there and find a solid group along the offensive front. But that's certainly something I'm going to be monitoring very closely. Before we get out of here today, I kind of want to circle back a little bit, though, and talk a little bit more about just some of these expectations that you should have in the 2027 class, and a little more specifically about how they pertain to the state of California, because Washington has done, again, such a good job historically down there that you need to see that continue year after year after year. And it's funny, I wrote down a couple of names here, and I didn't realize until this very moment that all four of the names I wrote down to talk about here all play in the secondary. So I think that this is something where, as I look at what could come next for Washington at that position, especially where you've got one commit and 3-star defensive back Maurice Williams, and you everydayers know this, I talked about this yesterday, but it certainly is important to bring that back up again, is as you look at some of these top targets, whether it's the two super highly rated guys in 4-star Gavin Williams and 4-star Asa Williava, that's great. You need to go find ways to continue to secure those sorts of talents on a year in, year out basis, especially with what those two guys in particular can do to the secondary. But somebody else that needs to be considered in that same boat at this point in time is 4-star safety Malakai Taufoou, where I watched his film again the other day after seeing that he was going to be coming up on a visit, and I was really, really impressed. He's a guy who's got that big, long frame where there's certainly a whole lot of room to add weight to it as well. And if you want to just take extra depth at that position to just continue having more options in that role behind, whether you do get Isala Esualiava or whether Gavin Day plays that in 2027 or whoever that might be, that can just be that big, long guy that you can just center so much around, whether it be the range when you want him to drop over the top and play coverage, or you do want to ask him to come down into the box and play a little bit more in run support. You want to split him out in the nickel, have him play a little bit in man coverage as well. I feel like Malakai Taufoou is a really underrated name who can do that at a very, very high level. So he's someone I'm very intrigued to see where Washington might go in that recruitment as those things continue, because this is a class where you have so many opportunities to go out there and add high-end defensive backs to this room, to a position where there are certainly some questions that I have at cornerback outside of the top 2, maybe even 3 guys. I'm curious to see what Rajon Duncan looks like during spring practice, but it's very clear how this coaching staff feels about him. But so there's a lot of room to continue adding depth there in terms of guys that maybe you expect can come in and compete really early on in their careers at outside corner. Evan Mack obviously being the top name there, and another one of those names who we did talk about earlier, and I have written down right here. I don't think I need to go too much in depth on that one at this point in time. But as I look at how the secondary continues to shape up, it's about just finding different ways to take advantage of the skill sets and the athleticism that all these different guys bring to the table because of how much Ryan Walters asked them to do, especially in run support, trying to get them down a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage and having them, some of these guys maybe cross train a little bit and play a little bit of outside corner or nickel or whatever it might be, because that is just another thing that has been a signature of Ryan Walters during his time, not just as a defensive coordinator, but as a head coach as well. So I look at all those things, and I think that the state of California could be just ripe for the taking for the Huskies, where, yeah, I mentioned Danny Lang a little bit earlier. Again, don't necessarily feel great there, but as I look at some of these other high-end names in the secondary, I like where Washington sits. And if we're looking at this class at the end of the day, and it does live up to the expectations that we were talking about a little bit earlier on, it's because the Huskies secured at least 2, if not 3, of those names I just mentioned in Malakai Taufoou, Gavin Williams, Isala Esa-Wiliaba, and Evan Mack. But that's all a conversation for another day. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much to all you every day out there for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Feel like we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please remember to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Monday.